Hello and welcome to August newsletter. And gosh, we're in the 8th month of this year, and it's been such a rapidly changing, evolving year. It's quite difficult to keep up with what's going on. But I'd really like to just thank everyone for their feedback on last month's newsletter. It really resonated with everyone who had been going through a bereavement or had just found out about a bereavement or a loss of any kind, whether it be a loss of a pet, a loss of a job. There's all sorts of forms of loss, and there were some wonderful stories that came through from everyone and questions being asked, and just asking for my opinion of, well, how do you cope with loss? How do we deal with loss that happened many years ago? It's a difficult topic. It can be a morbid topic as well. But yes, thank you so much to everyone who really participated in last month's newsletter, and just for that feedback. I really, really do appreciate it. As always, I really do appreciate it. I'll just adjust my glasses there so I can see myself. So July turned into a really, really interesting process for myself. One of my, old things that I forget, a habit, I suppose, that I have, is that I do give myself away. I give my power away. And I give my power away in lots of different things. And fear is one of those big things. And from the fear of doing something wrong, the fear of upsetting people, the fear of not being good enough, having fear imposed upon me. So in work situations where colleagues would use tactics to instill fear in me, to keep me in a particular place or a particular mindset on some occasions. So I'm going to talk about the topic of fear, because again, I do marvel at myself, at how slow I can be. I really do marvel at how slow I can be, and that the answers to some of my situations, they're right there in front of my face, right there. Don't see the symbols, don't see the signs, plodding along, and then something triggers, and I'm off on a tangent. And that's what happened in July. I've actually really enjoyed July. I found it a very liberating month. I found it a really good month in terms of good things happening. And one of the really great things that happened was I was just sent just a message, quite a lovely message. There was nothing wrong about the message, but it came from someone in my past I hadn't heard from quite a while. And I thought, oh. And then I started to dig into my past, but people who had been in my life, because there are people there for a reason and a season and a lifetime, and those that are there for a reason or a season, they come in and they go out. And those that are there for a season are here, and they're still here, and we still have that connection. And so this message came in, and it set me on this tangent, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with the message, but I just thought, oh, what am I doing? Why, what does that mean to me? What does that message mean to me? What was I doing back then? And it was many years ago. It was something connected many years ago. So I started to delve into, the people that were around me back then. And like most people, when friendships disintegrate and when they stop being part of your life, for me in particular, I always thank those around me. I say, thank you for being my friend. And then I move on. And I don't tend to look back. I don't have that voyeuristic nature where I'm always tapping into, looking into, checking up on. I tend to just move on and go on with my life, because new people come in and you get distracted. But I thought, well, I'll look up and just see what's happening, what's been going on in the past. And I suddenly became aware that I had this fear of not being myself, this fear of, well, gosh, I don't want to upset anyone. I don't want to put myself out there. And I suddenly realized I'd been living in a false fear. A self-imposed fear, I have to say, a fear that I had imposed on myself, not anybody else. But it was just a really interesting episode that occurred in July. And in looking into my past and looking and seeing that people had moved on, that there was nothing to be fearful about, that I'd held myself in this place of fear of not wanting to cause offence. So I changed my behaviour on social media. You'll see it in my newsletter. So I didn't post anything out there. And I have been trolled in the past on social media. So that in itself has restricted me for things that I would, I suppose that people would normally do on social media. I don't tend to do things on social media. In fact, there's only 2 selfies of me. I've only ever taken 2 selfies, so I don't put myself out there particularly, visually. I'll put myself out in the work that I'm doing, but there's not lots of pictures of me doing things socially for fear of causing offence. And that's my fear. That's my irrational fear of not wanting to be upset or not wanting whatever I've put out there to be picked up and utilised by someone else. And say fear, it's the fear of the unknown. It's a very unusual emotional aspect that we all suffer into and we all delve into on different levels. And then it becomes a controlling mechanism. And I suddenly realized that I have a self-imposed fear factor, not anyone else. I had created this fear of the unknown, which actually just didn't even exist. There was nothing to fear. And we'll come back to that whole aspect of there's nothing to fear but fear itself. What does fear actually mean in your life? What are you being fearful about? At the moment, there's lots going on globally that is instilling fear. And I know for myself, when we were in lockdown, I didn't go out. Michael did the shopping for the first few weeks. I wasn't in fear of getting COVID, but I have had a health condition with my lungs in the past. And my fear was I really didn't want to go back down that road. I just didn't want another year-long process of not being well. I've been there, seen that and done that on the lung aspect. I just didn't want to go there. But I did find that when I did actually go out putting a mask on, did I want to put a mask on? Was I fearful of putting a mask on for what other people would think of me for putting a mask on? And there's all of that sort of things that were going on in my mind. And they were irrational fears. So we have rational fear and irrational fear. We have fears that are self-imposed. We have fear that is a control mechanism, which could be an irrational fear. My fear of heights is an irrational fear. I actually have nothing to fear of heights. But I know that if I go somewhere really high up, suddenly vertigo comes in and I'm in this state of irrational fear. What am I to be fearful of? I'm not going to fall off, or I'm not going to cause myself any harm. So when we think about fears, and I want you to really think about where your fears are right now. Are they real or are they perceived? Is it something that you are aware of intuitively that strikes up a sense of apprehension or anxiety, which is slightly softer than fear? Or is it just something that you've made up in your mind that never existed? So for me, it's been a really interesting month looking at the fear of the past of causing offence. Well, actually, there's nothing to fear of the past. And so just move on, Phil. Move on, and be who you need to be. And then sort of re-engaging in my life, re-engaging with my passion. I've had a wonderful month of reconnecting to my intuitiveness, reconnecting to my inner sense of being, thinking sort of completely different about my business model and how I want to put that out there. And there's nothing to fear. Just put your business model out there. People will either become students or they won't become students. And more people are becoming students. So Fear, it's a really, really unusual place that we hold ourselves in, either consciously or unconsciously, whether rationally or irrationally. But I would really challenge you right now to really look at what you are fearful about right now. I think globally, this particular pandemic, that we have this fear nationally of being reinfected, of having a second wave, a third wave, a fourth wave. We see it globally that this is what's happening. Is a real fear? Is it a real fear for you? Is it something that you're living with? Does it cause anxiety? Is it something that you can just take a deep breath and put to one side and enjoy what we've got right now, whilst being aware, not fearful of, but being aware of our behaviors? Are we wearing, are we washing our hands properly? Are we keeping social distancing? Are we keeping a diary of where we've been just in case we need it? Are we being aware of, how we're interacting with our fellow friends and human beings here in New Zealand that is keeping ourselves safe? We can do lots of things that mitigates the fear or anxiety within us that keeps us healthy and safe. We are responsible, not the government. We're responsible. So we have to let go of our fears and we have to take responsibility. And I think when it comes to some of the fears that you may be sort of going through, what happens, when the wage subsidy stops? Will I be made redundant? Well, what happens if I am made redundant? Are there other jobs out there? What else can I do? And I think we have to let go of the fear of the what ifs, the whys, and the wherefores, because we can't change that. We can't live in our future. We can only live in our now. So rather than causing extreme stress within ourselves, then bring your thought process back to the here and now, and bring your thought process back to living without the fear of the what ifs. We can only deal with the what nows and what's happening now. I suppose for myself, gosh, if I was to think back, I've had a few really major escapades in my life where I have really allowed fear to dominate my decision making, to dampen down my personality, to limit my choices in my life. And it takes a lot for me to get really angry. It really takes a lot. I'm an extremely patient person. But when someone just keeps pushing and pushing, and they use fear as a mechanism, I have to say in my mid-20s, the worm really turned. One particular person just pushed me to the absolute limit of my emotional wedge. She pushed me to the thin edge of the wedge. And I took hold of my fear. My fear was, if I don't speak up, I've got to sit here and take this treatment because I'll lose my job. That was my fear. I'll lose my job. So what I actually did was I took back control, and I went to the personnel department and I asked what was on my record, and I asked what complaints had been put in there, and I asked where I legally stood, and I asked what I could do. So I put in a formal complaint. And then when I then met that person next, then it was a different ballgame, because I had nothing to fear. I'd built up the fear, but I actually had nothing to fear. There was nothing on my record. I wasn't going to lose my job. There was nothing that she could say. They were in the wrong. I wasn't in the wrong. They were in the wrong, and how they were speaking to me or treating me. So the worm definitely turned in terms of me going back into that particular workplace and saying, actually, you don't get to talk to me like that anymore. This is the deal. So, when we're thinking about fear, and I know I'm sort of rambling on a little bit, but I'm trying to give you some instances or some things to look at, because we have rational fear and irrational, perceived and unperceived fears. And I want you to really think about where you are mentally and emotionally right now. We're in a really dynamic time where things change, and they're changing all of the time. And we're having to pivot and move and shake and shift and be someone different as each week circumstances change. So really think about where your fears lie right now, and are they real? Can you just take a deep breath? Can you allow yourself space to grow personally, to find that courage, to be really brave, to find your voice? I did all of that back then in my early 20s. And in fact, nobody's been able to shut me up since then. So, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But, we've got to really think about where we're going and how we can achieve the best results through facing our fears and through acknowledging whether they're real or unreal. For me, I think in delving into my past, I really don't delve into my past. I do tend to just move on. But in delving into my past, I was really pleasantly pleased to see how people had moved on, the positive changes they'd made in their lives. They were so unrelated to where I am right now that fear that I'd put myself under of possibly, upsetting people or causing offense in any way. It's just like, well, actually, no, it just doesn't exist anymore. They're over there doing their wonderful things, being the wonderful people that they need to be. So I need to allow myself to be the wonderful person that I think I can be, and that I should be, and that I will be. And it was a very physical sensation reaction, that realization of, oh gosh, Phyllis, it's old stuff, there's just be who you need to be. Don't live in fear. Just be the person that you need to be. There's nothing to fear. So let's move on. And then, of course, after the relief and everything went off, I went, oh gosh, Phyllis, you're still learning. We're still learning this lesson. When will I ever learn this lesson of not putting myself in a place of stillness for fear of the unknown, of not stopping myself from blossoming and growing and just being for the fear of the unknown? Oh man, I do drive myself crazy. And so therefore, that's where I just think, oh, gosh, the answers are right there. The answers are right there. And sometimes it is quite nice to go back into our past, because I think that's where you then see not how much people have grown, not how they have grown, but actually how you have grown. What have you become from your experiences? Who have you become? And so from that perspective, yeah, that's always really enlightening for me. But I do get really cross at myself when the answer is just right there and I haven't perceived it, or it's taken me years to perceive it. I go, oh my gosh, here I go again. But we've got to live without regrets. We've got to, in the words of Robbie Williams, no regrets. You've got to accept that actually in that transiting time, you've become who you really need to become. And now you can just move forward in confidence and in joy. And I have to say, it really did have a very joyous July, which in comparison to May was wonderful, light relief, I have to say. I talked about an adventure on our last newsletter. So Michael and I, off we toodled on a camper van holiday. We've done lots of camping holidays, caravanning holidays, but we've never done a tiki tour in a camper van. It was an experience, I have to say. And it was a lovely and enjoyable experience, I have to say. There was no regrets there at all. And we went and did a sort of a revisit, again, going back into our past, revisiting places that we visited when we first came here as a family, when Nathan was a young boy and would come on holiday with us. Those days are long gone now. But it was lovely to visit places that we hadn't seen, reconnecting to the environment, seeing the changes actually, 13 years since we've visited some of those locations, so the changes that have occurred and how those communities have grown. And as always, with our holidays, we've been on not lots of holidays, but there's always a disastrous component. The Bridget Jones aspect of my personality comes out. And so we've had some real escapades on holidays, from planes being held to ransom to being in a tornado in the middle of the Mediterranean in our beautiful resort being wrecked, palm trees sticking out of buildings, etc. So yeah, we've had some real escapades on our holidays. So you can go onto my personal page and find our tiki tour with Gollum and Lady Galadriel, because that was, I thought I'd do a Hobbit theme around my narration of our holiday. Wonderful feedback from people on my Facebook page, really enjoyed it. So if you haven't been on my Facebook page, it's just Phyllis Brown, just look up Phyllis Brown and you'll find it. I think what has really tickled people is my definition of orcs. Again, the Hobbit theme, Lord of the Rings. And so we went to Queenstown, and we haven't been to Queenstown because when there are lots of orcs in there, it's hard to get around, it's hard to get parked, it's hard to do anything. So my definition of orcs was overseas, recreational, civilian sightseers. And that seemed to have really resonated with the Cantabrians here. So a little bit of an adventure, and celebrating Michael's birthday and celebrating the liberty that we have here, celebrating the beauty of New Zealand, going to one or two key areas that we haven't been. So bucket list, tick list being carried out there, and actually experiencing a tiki tour in a camper van. Have to say it won't go again in the winter time. I think camper vans in the summer are awesome. In the winter time, I was sleeping with my hat, my fleece jacket, my dressing gown, my slippers, and fully clothed underneath because it was freezing. And, we did visit Larnac Castle in the snow. So that's how cold it was. It was absolutely perishingly cold, but it was an adventure. And I did say that we would be having an adventure. So hopefully you guys are all out there having an adventure. So what's new in me liberating myself from my fear? So what's new? I used to have a monthly meditation class, and I'm going to put it online because lots of students are online now. And I think lots of people here in Christchurch were used to doing online meetings now. So I'm going to do a monthly spiritual clinic, and I might actually add in a little meditation to in the theme of the clinic. This month's clinic is wrapped around intuitive gifts. What are they? How do you recognize them? And guides, your spiritual guides. Who are they? What are they? And again, how do we connect to them? So I'm just going to do a lovely spiritual discussion with everyone who comes on board. I'd love to hear your questions. It's a free webinar. There's no cost at all. If you have any questions about intuitive gifts or intuitive skills, channeling, how do we channel our intuitiveness? How can we trust it? Then please send them in, because I'd love to be able to answer your questions in real time whilst we are online. So there is a link in this newsletter, and there will be there's posts going out there, so you can join. It's free to join. Send in your questions, and we'll see you on the 19th of August at 7:30 New Zealand time. And yeah, there might be a little surprise giveaway or something at the end of our session. So that's new for me as well. So hopefully we'll see you on our spiritual clinic. Please continue to send in your feedback. It really does help me frame and where I'm going with the newsletter. It helps validate what I've been through, and I think I validate what you guys go through. So it's lovely to know that we're all in the same boat, so to speak, emotionally or vibrationally as we move through the months. And yeah, enjoy August time. I have to say I'm a Leo. I have lots of Facebook friends who are Leos. So a big happy birthday to all of my Leo friends. It's exciting. It is our month, and we're coming up to the 8th of the 8th, the Lion's Gate, a beautiful spiritual opportunity coming up for vibrational frequencies. So, be ready to meditate, to set out your thoughts and processes, your hopes and wishes on the 8th of the 8th, and get that lion energy behind you. But yeah, big happy birthday to all of my Facebook pride. I would say all my lovely Facebook friends who are fellow Leos. Until the next time, take care for now, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.